Okay, hi guys, and welcome to the show. And today we are finally reviewing an Oris 65, but this is no ordinary Oris 65. This is a special limited edition done in collaboration between Oris and Topper Jewelers of California. And I believe there were only 100 of these made. Now, before I get into this, I've got to do a quick wristwatch check, and rather predictably, I'm wearing my Omega from World War II. This is a lovely little World War II era pilot's watch. I'm not sure if you can see the blued hands there, but very much enjoying it. Still in the honeymoon period, as you can well imagine. So where do we start with the Oris 65? Well, the Oris 65, as you can undoubtedly tell by the aesthetics, is a heritage, kind of vintage-inspired re-release of a classic diver from the mid-60s by Oris. Now, as you all know, big fan of Oris. They've been going for well over 100 years. Fully independent Swiss quality brand that I do adore, and I've owned many Oris watches, I'm sure you're well aware. So the Oris 65 reissue came out in 2015 and has become very much a favorite in what is quite an overcrowded genre. A lot of watch brands have a ton of vintage inspired divers, but what is rather refreshing is the Oris 65's very distinctive style. So before we discuss the watch in more detail, let's just go over the basic specifications and the differences between this and your standard 65. So we'll do dimensions first. We have a diameter of 40 millimeters, a height or thickness of just a smidgen over 12. Lug to lug, we're looking at 48 millimeters, and then lug width 20. So a really nice size, quite refreshing, especially as so many divers today are 42 and over. Now, it's worthy to note that it does come on a bracelet and a very nicely done tropical rubber strap. Speaking from experience, that the rubber straps that Oris do have always been absolutely fantastic. We get a brushed buckle there, signed of course, and this very nice texture, kind of faux carbon fiber pattern on it. On the back we get perforated diamond pattern that really grips the wrist. The bracelet is rather interesting. I love the way it tapers. We get a double push button clasp with micro extensions. This is what Oris do so well. The machining and construction is always impeccably done. Very, very solid and robust feeling. Completely brushed with riveted pins on the side holding it together. Again, very retro inspired or vintage inspired. Remarkably similar to kind of Rolex mid-century bracelets, if you remember that Paul Newman Daytona I looked at. However, this is not does not expand, is not spring-loaded like that one. It's worthy to note that the end links are solid. And again, rather predictably, I am wearing it on the NATO strap. This is what Stephen has put it on, and I've got to give a quick shout out to Stephen for lending this in, making this review possible. He's matched it beautifully. So the watch itself is completely stainless steel. We have high polished on the sides and then brushed at the top. The edges are super sharp. The finishing is absolutely first class, and what you'd come to expect from Oris. We have a 120 click unidirectional bezel, which is very solid feeling. I really do like the action on it. Some people have complained actually about the action. I think it's done very well. It is rather a thin bezel if you compare it to other divers. I'm not wearing a diver right now, but it's remarkably a thin insert there. We get no crown guards, which is typical of divers of that era. The crown does protrude quite a bit. It is signed. It's a screw-down crown. Now, talking of the screw-down crown, the water resistance is only 100 meters, but the real star of the show has got to be the combination of this wonderfully domed sapphire glass and a domed dial as well, which is not something easy to do. It requires quite a lot of skill, and it's not cheap to make either. The dial, again, is very faithful to the 60s original. We have the minute track this time on the inside, and this Soviet style, well, I call it Soviet style, it just reminds me of the lettering on Soviet propaganda posters, very 60s. The numerals actually cut out So the superluminova, and it is superluminova, frames the numerals. So we got 12, 3, 6, and 9. We have pencil style hands with the lollipop seconds. The hour hand is segmented to assist distinguishing it from the minute hand. A subtle touch, but very nice indeed. The dial itself is a glossy black, which at certain angles it looks like it's blue, but that's just the anti-reflective coating on the sapphire glass. The dome dial has some dazzling distortions that are exaggerated or accentuated rather by the glass. So at certain angles it's just enthralling to look at. So what are the differences between this and your standard Oris 65? Well, it's extremely subtly changed. If you've noticed, we haven't got a date at the 6 o'clock. On the standard Oris 65, the date is, well, cuts slightly into the 6 o'clock marker. They've moved Swiss made down to the bottom of the dial before it was incorporated into that minute track on the middle of the dial, let's say. They've also added a faded orange to the tip of the second hand and corresponding orange lume pip on the bezel. They have also done away with the DLC coated bezel, so it's now high polished steel, giving it a more professional look. They've also changed the text on the actual dial. I believe where it says Oris Automatic there was a line separating. They've cleaned that up, they've got rid of that, and they've put anti-shock, again referencing the classic Oris divers. They did away with, I think it was said 100 meters on the standard version, as 100 meters is not anything really to write home about. Well, maybe back in the 60s, but these days, you know, most divers are, what, 300, 200 and upwards. So they've got rid of that, and it really does make sense. I think it's a logical, sensible decision, and also I like that little nod to the past as well. The lack of the date, even though it was at the 6, assists the symmetry not just horizontally but vertically as well. The numerals is done in this slightly kind of avocado green tint. It's a lot more yellow than green, I must say, even though it does glow green. Another subtle little bit of design is the markers on the dive time bezel. They're trapezium shaped, pointing inwards. Extremely subtle touch, but I like it, and it's just something that differentiates it again. So how does it wear? Let's pop it on the wrist and find out. I think this size is going to please a lot of wrists. It's very comfortable. It's got a lot of presence. Angling it, it's just very fun to look at. The weight is about 76 grams, so you don't really feel it. The lugs are quite flat. There is not that much curvature, so maybe for a smaller wrist or anything smaller than mine, it might be a bit of an issue. It's worthy to point out that the original 1960s version was 36 millimeters. I would love to see a 38 millimeter of this. I think that would have been the sweet spot, but then again, that's just my preference. Now on this NATO strap, it is a little bit taller, but generally if you wear it on a rubber strap, or I could really see this on a lovely distressed luxury leather strap, I think it would really work. It does wear a little bit flatter, so it wears incredibly well. So inside we have a modified Sellita SW200. So this is an automatic 26 dual movement operating at 28,800 vibrations an hour, a 38-hour power reserve. We do have bidirectional winding, and of course if we unscrew the crown and pull it out, it's hackable, and we do get manual wind. Oris have modified this, not only adding their famous red rotor, but on this particular version they've removed the date wheel, which gets rid of that awkward clicking over of the date at midnight, which I really do appreciate. As we all know, the SW200 by Sellita is a clone of the ETA 2824-2. Personally, and I'm talking from experience of owning a lot of these Sellitas, I find them extremely reliable, quite accurate. This is just the standard version, however. I don't think it's even regulated. Very slightly improved version of the ETA. They have new tooth profiles and improved 3 of the gears, slightly making it a little bit more longer lasting and perform a little better generally. They're almost identical apart from these tiny little nuanced improvements. Accuracy on this particular one, we're looking at +9. So let's discuss the negatives and the positives. We'll start with the positives. Well, first of all, something I should mention, by getting rid of the date, this is the first Oris diver with no date. That, it being a limited edition as well of only 100 pieces, certainly makes it quite a desired and collectible piece that will maintain or help to increase its value over time. The look is extremely distinctive. It might have a Marmite effect, but if you like this kind of thing, a nice change from, you know, what is usually a bit of a played out market. Like I said, it's a most alluring feature, without a doubt, is that domed crystal and domed dial. The way it distorts at angles is just a pleasure. I love the size. You're getting a really beautifully made watch. Vintage inspired divers being such in vogue in the last few years. It's doing its own thing, and I really respect that. It's not trying to be a Seamaster or a Submariner. It's totally very much its own thing. I love the fact it has no date. I think it's a logical progression, and certainly a complication that's not really needed on a dive watch. So what are the negatives? Well, if we look back at the 60s originals, they all had their own in-house movements. For example, the Caliber's 654 and the 484. This is before Oris switched to ETA. I'd love to see the implementation of Oris's new in-house movements like the 111 and the 112, which I mentioned recently when we were talking about aviation watches. Yes, it would push up the price, but I think it would make it even more original and a little bit more horologically respectable. In terms of its value, you're paying $2,000 for this limited edition. When you compare it to other brands, off the top of my head, what Zinn have to offer for that kind of money, it is a little bit of a negative. Another negative I've found is the crown design. Now, while I totally get it having no crown guards, and I think it aesthetically it's a, you know, definitely works, and I'm telling you this from experience. I had a watch, a Citizen watch, many years ago that had a similar crown without crown guards, and it caught on the pocket, or when I put my hand in my pockets, and it actually bent the crown. Now this is a screw down crown, whereas that Citizen I had was not, and it really damaged it. This can catch, and it's made me a little bit fearful because it does protrude further away, and also because of the shape of that crown, it doesn't sit flush with the case. Also, it's got to be said, the style and lettering is not everybody's cup of tea. Bit of a Marmite effect. I really like it. I think it's gives it character and its own personality. However, some people just don't. But I think it is integral to its style, because if you look at the 60s, I mean, you know, the pop art movement was in full swing. It has a very playful bon vivance, unlike anything else out there, really. Another little negative is the printing of the luminova. The actual markings are a little bit weaker compared to the hands. The hands are very responsive and glow a lot longer. The lettering on the dial tends to fade quicker. I think it's just because it's a little bit thinner in application on the dial in comparison to the hands. Also, it's got to be said, 100 meters water resistant is a little weak, especially by today's standards. You could argue it's not a true diving watch, although, you know, back in the day 100 meters was perfectly acceptable. In today's world, when you can buy a $200 Seiko that is ISO certified and 200 meters water resistant and respected and held in high regard by professional divers, this is more of a desk diver, so to speak. Although, you know, 100 meters water resistance is very usable, and I've got to say, actually, this would make a really great, fun weekend away watch. This exemplifies what Oris do so well and solidifies their brand's reputation for making excellent dive watches that follow their own path. It's in stark contrast to the modernist industrial style in the Aquis, for example. Just shows you the dynamic range that Oris has to offer. So despite its negatives, it's still a very lovable watch with a ton of charm, a ton of personality, and quite refreshing, I gotta be honest, in a genre that sometimes, you know, even I do get a little bored of, but then I always come back to because it's so lovable. Could just see this on some lively NATO straps or a bright pearl on it would just absolutely pop. Yeah, very fun indeed. And I think that's the crucial word here, fun. It's dazzling to look at and very enjoyable. Crucially, it's not that different from the standard version. If you're considering a 65, go for the date. It's great. I love it despite its shortcomings. It's a fantastic watch, and I'm gonna say it is pure class in its special way. Definitely. Anyway, shout out to Stephen again. Thank you so much for entrusting me with your beautiful watch. Enjoy it. Let me know your thoughts, queries, comments, opinions, all the rest of it down below. Thank you very, very much for watching, and please don't forget to like this video if you enjoyed it and found it useful. And as always, guys, I will catch you in the next one. Okay, ciao.